day and saying, honey, I just talked to a new God, and he wants us to leave our home and go to the place that he wants us to go to. How many of you, if you were his wife, would say, honey, no more pizza tonight. Your dreams are too weird. Like, it's just, like, I just wonder how Sarai felt about him just coming home saying, look, I've met this new God named Yahweh, and he says we should leave home, and so we're going to do it. I just wonder how she felt the whole time. Now, it makes this clear, and I think that most Hebrew scholars would agree that this verse says much more than what it says. It says, now Sarai was barren, she had no child. In a culture where children are your greatest mark of blessing, she has nothing, and she's 65. Now, I'd like all of our over 65 women who are pregnant to please raise your hand. Okay, so is everybody, like most of the women are just going, this, first of all, who would want to be pregnant at 65? And second, like that is so past childbearing age, it's crazy. And I think Sarai was struggling. As we celebrate Mother's Day today, perhaps many of you do not like this holiday. I hear this many times. My wife enjoys spending time with lots of different women during the week, and she tells me women are just struggling with this holiday. Some of us have mothers that were not very kind, not very loving. Some of us have wanted to be mothers and are not. Some of us just recently lost a mother. Some of us are mothers who just recently lost a child. There's all sorts of reasons to not be too thrilled about this holiday. Last month I did a funeral that was, out of the hundreds of funerals that I've done, it was the saddest funeral I have ever done. This family has one little boy, and they have had 8 babies die since him. 6 of them died in the first trimesters in what we call a miscarriage, but those are still very, very painful for moms. That's a baby, and that mom is grieving. They lost another baby in the second trimester, and this baby boy they lost 3 weeks before birth. And they were hopeless. My guess is that today is not a great Mother's Day for her. Even though she's thankful for that one boy she has, it's been a life of sorrow for her. So if you're struggling today with Mother's Day, I want you to be encouraged that there were all sorts of women throughout the Bible that didn't like the day either. I'm guessing that Sarai, if she was typical for her culture, was married when she was in her early teens. And I have my doubts that Hallmark was around back then, so they didn't have Mother's Day. But if they did, she would have had a lot of Mother's Days where she was miserable, just miserable. I don't have a baby once again. Now think about the fact, guys, that she's got 2 out of 3. She's still stinking drop dead gorgeous at 65. She's stinking rich. Like, she's beautiful and she's rich, but she is childless. Now, if you want to get a black eye, you go up to her and say, but babe, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. You just tell her that. 2 out of 3 is nothing when you don't have your heart's desire. So the God of the universe speaks to Abram, says, move to where I tell you. So Abram moves his whole clan around the Fertile Crescent from modern-day Iraq over to modern-day Israel. And here's what happens. Immediately, there's a famine. So Sarai's going, okay, so this God that only talks to you, doesn't say a thing to me, tells us to go to this new place, and as soon as we get there, there's a famine. I'm thrilled about this new God of yours, Abram. Now, I'd like you to catch a principle that's in the Bible here. And the principle is profound. We think that when God leads us, it will be easy. In fact, a lot of us say, man, things have been falling into place. Only God could be doing this. Let me clarify that typically when God leads us, things get hard. Are you with me? Woo. So if the Holy Spirit is leading me, it's going to have problems. Now, it's interesting because at this time, all the peoples of the world were worshiping their idols. And the reason they worshiped them was so that things would go well with them. They were called fertility gods for a reason. We worship this God, and this God gives us fertility in the ground, gives us grass for our flocks to eat, gives us crops for us to eat. And so this God is not a fertility God. He brings them around the Fertile Crescent, gets them to the place they're supposed to be, and there's no fertility. It's dead. It's famine. So Abram moves everyone, his whole clan, even though none of them were his kids, he moves them all to Egypt. Now, on this little move, we get the idea of how wealthy Abram really is because of the company he keeps. Because he's immediately going to be invited over to Pharaoh's house. And he knows it. So he tells Sarai, sweetheart, listen, I'm the head of the clan, and you're beautiful. And if we go to Pharaoh's house, he's going to see how beautiful you are. He's going to want to put you in his harem, and he'll kill me. So would you just let me tell him that you're my sister, which is a half-truth because she's his half-sister? But we won't tell him you're my wife, and you'll become a part of his harem. Now, ladies, I want you to raise your hand if you think that would be a thrilling idea for your husband to traffic you like that. Would you please raise your hand? Okay, we're 0 for 2 right now. I just wonder how Sarai feels at this point. She actually joins Pharaoh's harem. Like, what is she feeling? I wonder how her belief in God is at this point. This God told us to come to Canaan. We get to Canaan, there is a horrible famine. So we come down to Egypt, and my husband traffics me with Pharaoh. So then we get the Bible to say this, some time later. The Lord spoke to Abram in a vision and said to him, do not be afraid, Abram, for I will protect you, and your reward will be great. But Abram replied, O sovereign Lord, what good are all your blessings when I don't even have a son? Are you catching how Abram and Sarai feel about the fact that they're childless? Like, I've got everything I need, and yet I don't even have a child. Since you've given me no children, Eleazar of Damascus, a servant in my household, will inherit my wealth. You've given me no descendants of my own, so one of my servants will be my heir. Then the Lord said to him, no, your servant will not be your heir, for you will have a son of your own who will be your heir. Then God shows Abram the stars of the sky. They're out hanging out on a beautiful cloudless night, and he says, do you see the stars? The children that will come right from your body will have so many descendants, it'll be like the stars of the sky. There'll be that many. Now, that is a very clear communicator. Are you catching this invisible God speaking to Abram? It's so beautiful. Such an invisible but beautifully communicative God who speaks. I want you to understand that he initiates everything. Faith is always rooted in God's initiative. And I just simply am a responder. It goes on to say, and he believed the Lord, and he, God, counted it as righteousness. Now, guys, that is such a weird thing compared to all other ancient gods. Just to simply believe what your God says, and you have to do nothing else but believe him, is just so different, because every other god had to be appeased by what you do. You had to earn righteousness with every other god. But God says, you just trust what I say, and I'll count that as you and me having a right relationship. So can you imagine? Abram comes home from this visit with God and announces to Sarai, honey, God says we, meaning you and me, we're going to have a baby. Isn't that exciting, honey? Honey, think about it. God told me we're going to have a baby, and that baby would have babies, and that eventually we'd have so many descendants, it'd be like the stars in the sky. Now, if you're Sarai and you've not yet heard the voice of God, what are you thinking? Now, here's what happens then. Remember, when God is leading, it's not easy. So Abram comes home and tells her this, we're going to have a baby, and 10 years pass. Imagine what Sarai thinks of Abram's relationship with the invisible God is like now. 10 years. That, guys, I'm one of the 4/3 of people that struggle with fractions, but I know that 65 plus 10 is 75. She's 75 years old now. So impatience gets a hold of Sarah. She's been hearing probably quite often, babe, just hang on, we're going to have a baby. But impatience gets a hold of Sarah, and she tries to help Abraham get what God has promised. And now this is frankly a normal thing in their culture. When a wife could not have a baby, if she had wealth, she'd have a handmaid, and she could give the handmaid to the husband to have intimacy with. And that baby born from that relationship would be the barren woman's vicarious baby. This was normal because having babies wasn't easy. A lot of them died. So she recommends that he sleep with her handmaid, the Egyptian named Hagar. And just understand, this is a root of her being impatient. Ladies, have any of you ever been impatient with God? You don't have to raise your hand because I know every hand would go up. Now, I want you to understand how serious this was. From this tryst with Sarah's handmaid, a guy named Ishmael is born. Ishmael is recognized by all of Islam as the father of Islam. He is recognized by all Arabians, Saudi Arabians, as the father of all Saudis. And he is the half-brother of the Jews that they hate. Are you catching this? Like they're family. And Ishmael, guys, let me just say this. If you read about Ishmael, he's a good man. He's a good dude, and God blesses him. I just want you to hear that. And anybody that comes from Abraham is blessed from this point on. But let me just get what I get out of this story, and that is this. Whenever I get impatient and try to help God, do you ever try to help the Lord do what he tells you he'll do? I do it. Whenever I get impatient and try to help God, I have a real good chance of birthing an Ishmael, which is a work of the flesh. Now, do you want to hear how good God is? This is a profound statement. God will bless my Ishmael in ways I don't understand. Because you are right with God, not because of how good you do or how perfect you are, or even if you mess up now and then, you're blessed by God because he knows you have a relationship with him based on faith. Wow. God will bless my Ishmael. What? There are mothers here today that have maybe had a baby out of wedlock. Aren't you thankful for that baby? There are people here who have perhaps a business started on your own without God, and yet God blessed it. There's all sorts of stuff that happens, and I don't get it. It's just the graciousness of our God. Now, I do need to put a however on that, and that is, however, there may be long-lasting negative consequences. There may be some of those. You see, Ishmael was the father of the Saudi Arabians, the father of the Arabs, and the father of Islam. And Islam has now declared itself an enemy of Jews and Christians. It's a long-lasting consequence. So 10 years then passed, and now we get, you know what happens then? 13 more years pass. Ever since God met with Abram the first time, it's been 23 years. Abram's 99, Sarai is 89. And 3 visitors come to visit with Abram. And we find out from the context that at least 2 of these visitors are angels. Many scholars believe the third one is Jesus before he was ever Jesus. Wouldn't that be cool? That's kind of cool, huh? So these 3 guys come to visit Abraham, and one of them asks, "Where's your wife?" First time something's been brought up about Sarai this whole time. He says, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" the visitors asked. "She's inside the tent," Abraham replied. Then one of them said, "I will return to you about this time next year, and your wife Sarah will have a son. Now, did you catch that? It's because I will return. I'm going to make this happen. It's going to be my presence. Sarah was listening to this conversation from the tent. Abraham and Sarah were both very old by this time, and Sarah was long past the age of having children. So she laughed silently to herself and said, "How could a worn-out woman like me enjoy such pleasure, especially when my master, my husband, is also so old?" So she's giggling. This God of Abraham, he's a corker, he is, if she was Irish. He's a corker. Where does he get off saying this? Like, come on. I'm 89. Do we have any 89-year-olds here? 89-year-old women? Anyone close to that age? Like a year or two? Well, we got a young crowd here today. Okay, now that goes to tell you, when you're 89, you don't even feel like going to church. Even less have a baby. So Sarah's laughing. She's giggling because she says, "How can a worn-out old woman like me have a baby?" Even with, and my man, he's even older than I am. Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh?" That's profound because it says she laughed to herself. So we learned something about this God, that he sees everything. Why did she say why can an old woman like me have a baby? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return about this next year, and Sarah will have a son. Now, apparently Sarah had come out of the tent, and she was afraid, and she denied it, saying, I did not laugh. I didn't laugh. No, I didn't. But the Lord said, no, you did laugh. Isn't that a great story? No, you did. And she immediately is convicted and goes, okay. So the next year, she celebrates Mother's Day because she has a son named Isaac, which means he laughs. Isn't that good? I just think that's so good. She's 90 years old when he's born. Now, this is what the writer of Hebrews says about Sarah. By faith, Sarah herself received power to conceive, even when she was past the age, since she considered him faithful who had promised. Now, this is Sarah's only experience with God. I think it was gracious. He caught her. He knew what happened in her heart. He caught her knowing that she didn't trust him. And he wanted to reaffirm to her, is anything too difficult for me? Friend, have you given up? Have you gotten impatient? I think this story teaches us, she was 65 when Abram started hanging out with God. And she's finally 90 when she has this baby. Something that only God could do. Are you willing just to step out by faith and trust him to do what he's promised you? Could I invite you to just stir up a trust in what God says? Let me ask you a couple take-home questions. Do I believe my perfect walk is not what God is looking for, but rather my imperfect faith in Him? Do I believe that? Or do I have to be perfect for Him? You see, it's not your perfect walk. You don't have to be perfect for God. He expects you to be mortal and to be imperfect and to make mistakes. It's crazy. When God spoke of Abraham from the New Testament, He speaks nothing of how he messed up. He talks all about how he had faith in me, and I love it about him. He says it about Sarah. So, how do you get to a place where you're trusting God for what He's promised? What I'd like to do is ask you to take time this week and thank God for His many blessings. Because it happens through thanksgiving, through gratitude. Lord, I haven't got what I really want. I'm beautiful, I'm rich, but I don't have a baby. And I just thank you that I'm beautiful. Thank you that I'm rich. Thank you that I have a husband that loves me. And thank you that you do what you promise you'll do. That's what Sarah had to come to do. Will you close your eyes with me for a moment? Anybody here want to raise your hand and say, I've kind of given up on trusting what God promised? And would you pray for me that I will trust Him to do what He said? Anybody? Thanks. Thanks. Oh, thanks. All over the room. Lord, I thank you that you're just faithful to do what you say you'll do, aren't you? And sometimes it's not on our timetable, is it? We just want you to do things now because we're so used to McDonald's. And we just ask you to give us patience. Lord, thank you that when you call us, you don't ever call us to easy things. You've not called us to easy things. And so we just trust you today to do something profound in us and through us. Lord, thanks for our moms today. We want to just take a moment and say thank you for Mom. Lord, she may be imperfect, but I thank you for her. Thank you for her. In Jesus' name, amen.